Hello, this is Chris Jansen. Welcome to the End Evil podcast.
Hello. Welcome, folks. My name's Chris. I'm here with some good friends. We're the One Great Work Warriors. I'm here with Rick and Jerry, Derek, Brandon, and Jim. And we're going to have today a hard-hitting discussion about the subject of religion. This started because Rick was going through some long and difficult but important conversations with people on his radio show, and he was talking to us about his struggle of trying to talk with people that are like really into their religion and trying to find some kind of common ground when we're talking about natural law. And so we all started piping in, and then it got this whole conversation going. And so I'm going to pass it off to Brandon, and we're just going to get started by talking about what religion means.
Thank you for that wonderful intro, Chris. And I want to thank all these wonderful individuals for joining this discussion. And, first off, we're not trying to attack anybody. We're just trying to, help understand this crazy world and help understand truth. And I doubt anyone here is an atheist. So, don't throw any labels on us, which funny thing is the first group of atheists were the Christians. That's what a lot of people don't understand, because the original definition of atheism were the ones who didn't believe in the Roman pantheon, Hell, Sol, Hell Invictus. So I always like to kind of, lay a foundation to get people to understand where we are coming from. So when we are saying religion, we have to understand it from its etymology, its origin. And from my research, something I've talked about, many times, is the word religion has pretty much two connotations. You have its first connotation, which means to bind, to tie off, to hold back from growth. And I always take this etymology and apply it to reality. So most people understand all of the dangers and the problems that have come out of religion from its first connotation. But like I've said in many of my presentations, is religion also has a second form of origin, from its derivation. So it would be to ally, to wrap, this connection. So that's really what true religion was supposed to have been about, connecting us back to source, connecting us with the truth, connecting us, back to ourselves, connecting us, back with God, connecting us back with higher states of, consciousness, and also connecting us back to the heart-based intelligence. So, Rick, you wanna talk about it real quick?
Oh, sure. Thank you, Brandon. As Chris was saying, I definitely in the last few weeks have gotten into some pretty intense discussions. Not like really bad, but they were definitely, we were, kind of going in circles near the end, but it was really interesting to me because the friend I was talking to is very, very religious, a Catholic or Christian, I should say, and he's very into the Bible and following it word for word, kind of like everything in the Bible is true. And so we kind of, I don't know how we got onto the discussion. I still try to think back to how we even got talking about it, but we did, and we really got in depth for like, we were on the talking for probably 4 hours, 4.5 hours, trying to, hear each other out kind of. And then very quickly, it just got really, it just got really awkward because I definitely was looking at it from his side, because I was, for the first 8 years of my schooling, I was in a Catholic school, so I definitely had to read the Bible. We kind of studied the Bible, so I know that aspect of it. And we were kind of talking, and what I found is that we started to get hung up on words, because he would say the Bible's, the word of God, and I would say, okay, I believe there's a creator. You could call it a source. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you want to call it. And he was really hung up on the words, like, so you mean God? And I'm like, no, if that's what you want to call him, that's fine by me. I'm not going to argue. And so it came down, it came down to, I had the ultimatum of believing that everything in the Bible was true, word for word, or it was all a lie. That was kind of where the argument not argument, I keep saying that, sorry. The discussion kind of ended, was that was kind of what the line in the sand that was drawn. And I was kind of hitting it from the side that I don't see it that way. Like I look at the stories in the Bible, I look at them as allegories and the teachings. And so I kind of see teachings of morality, I see principles, I see natural law in it. So I learning from the stories, but it was really hung up on the word. That's where at least this discussion went, was we were kind of getting hung up on the words God, if it's all true, if it's half true. So that's kind of where this conversation went. And it just got, we just kind of found that we were going in circles. I kept trying to say, we want this. It sounds like we want the same things, but we're just getting hung up on this. So that was kind of where it started and ended for us, was on these words. So if anyone wants to chime in.
Hey guys. Rick, that's really interesting, and I'm sure you like held some decent space and patience for him and all that, and just like trying to reason with him and trying to find some common ground, like a lot of
Right.
us try to do. And yeah, it's like anyone growing up in life. I mean, I didn't really go to church. I wasn't religious just because my parents weren't feeling it, I guess, and they're not atheists or whatever. But yeah, just like kind of like being on that peripheral outside and just kind of curious as to like, wow, there's like all these churches and all these people devoting all this stuff, and like, mankind has built like umpteen billion edifices to praise whatever, their, religions, you know, their gods and all that stuff. But yeah. Yeah, Brandon, it's interesting because yeah, you just put out a presentation recently, and you were also visited the same day. We had a discussion with Leslie, actually, um, with some people who witnessed Jehovah and decided to knock on doors to, make sure everyone is trying to, adhere to that. And, growing up, I've had friends where like one of my friend's mother, like she was a Jehovah's Witness, like a daughter of them or something like that, or she was like put into that cult, and like it seriously screwed her over. She had like severe like trauma and stuff. It took her years to like get over that stuff. So, and yeah, you can, talk about the Catholic, all the whatever priests that, raped how many boys or whatever. There's like all these things that you hear about and this and that. And you're just like, wow, okay. And like, what's the goal of all these religions? Like, what does it amount to in the end? Like, what's the totality of the evolution of man, under these, quote unquote, unifying, things? It just seems like there's a good amount of dogma. There's like limited hangouts involved with that. Limited hangout is something that, there's like low ceilings of enlightenment or evolution. It ain't the bee's knees, or if you will. But with that said, there's always like some golden nuggets of truth and, aspects of natural law, cosmic law, morality, and all these things that are great to live by and embody. But at the same time, it's like, and I lived in France for 13 years, and there's a lot of Muslims over there. I've seen and witnessed, thousands of them acting out in civilization. I see a lot of them like being so adherent to the Quran and whatever. You see these people with the black dot on the forehead because they bang their heads, 5 times times 5, per day, praying to the east every time. That's where Allah, blah blah blah. That's nothing against them. It's just an observation. And I just see that a lot of them, they can be just two-faced, and it seems like they're trying to live life adhering to, what their god's wanting to, but it's almost like in a fear-based um way of life, in a sense, because and almost like defiant towards these things because they feel limited in those constructs. And so there's just like contradictions and things in way of life and thinking and acting and behaving, and even, yeah, and I'm sure someone will love to break down the difference between knowledge and belief.
Mhm. Well, I'll take that. I'll take that task. When you look at the word hell belief, it has the word hell lot into it. But belief is based on subjective hell, perception or interpretation. So we see, in today's day and age, you have a lot of people believing that they can be whatever they want. But that is not true. Hell, that is not, hell, based off facts. That's not based off knowledge. So how knowledge would be based off of, facts or, truth, something that has happened in her reality, that which is. So her belief is based off her perception, and perception is not reality. Perception is not truth. Perception is a way, or her belief is a way for us to take in her information. How so we break down her reality, and we have to take in the information and discern it. So that's where beliefs can come into play. But we have to learn to align that which we believe or that which we perceive to that which is, and that's what people don't want to do. And that which is true. Things that have happened in the past, things that are happening with now. And that's how we really, start to communicate with God, or help to soar with, is we have to align our perceptions, our beliefs to that which is true, and not put our beliefs, put how we perceive things above the truth, above real knowledge. And that's the thing, is a lot of people in religion are afraid of knowledge, and that's why they will just spew belief, 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 because belief in and of itself isn't bad. But the problem is once that belief gets mistaken for truth, then you create this form of dogmatic way of thinking. Then therefore you become attached to that which you think is true, when in reality it is false. Then in that hell attachment, that egoic hell attachment, you don't want to let go of those beliefs. So you start to protect, how those, what we see is a lot of people are just so stuck in this realm of belief that they would die before they was to change hell this belief. And that's why when you bring them like real facts, real knowledge, real information that may go hell against what they believe, they react in that fight or flight, hell animalistic mentality, because they have that attachment to that belief. Then therefore you were threatening their worldview, because our beliefs are going to shape who we are. They're going to shape our interactions with other people, and they're going to shape our worldviews. So if we have these beliefs that are inaccurate and are not true, then what are they going to say as far as hell mapping hell the world? It's going to shape our hell worldview. So we're going to have a distorted sense of not just ourselves, but a distorted sense of reality. And that's what we've seen, hell, with these belief structures.
Jim, you want to jump in next and talk a little bit about what your experience with religion, or what does it mean?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, this is really cool to speak about, because I think about it a lot. And Brandon, you had mentioned there's no atheists here, but 5 years ago, I was definitely an atheist. And I've come to realize I was against the religious God, but I didn't know that back then. And like growing up, I grew up Roman Catholic, and I had a lot of questions, but people would just say, just no, this is just the way it is. And like I was like, I always would think like, well, people don't act like Jesus. And like Brandon, you were saying, it's like the belief, like protecting the lie. And it's funny, this morning I was actually speaking with a nun, because I work I have a farm on a campus where it's a convent, and she's like 88, and I know her pretty well. And we actually started talking about this stuff I was like, Jesus would never, I can't see how Jesus would ever vote. And I got scared, like, how far I can go with it. I was like, how is it possible to believe in Jesus and the Pope at the same time? If you look back at history, and the Pope was the leader of like world domination, the Crusades, the Inquisition, and like we could get killed for talking like this, like we are now, back then. So I feel like that programming from our ancestors, that fear is still in us, and that's what's keeping people to protect that lie, like that the Pope is the Antichrist. But you think, like, how could the Pope be anything to like be the spokesman for Jesus if he funded slavery, and supported that all that barbaric stuff? So, but I had come to realize that maybe like when I was my late teens, I was like, fuck this shit. Like I felt like maybe there was a God, but there was like, I was brought up to believe this God, fearing God, and you're gonna punish you and all that shit. And I was like, fuck this, he's not real. And I became an alcoholic too, so that helped block all that out. And I didn't think about it for like over 20 years. I just like if I did, I would actually even put my middle finger up in the sky. I'd be like, fuck that. There's no God. Fuck you, God. That's what I would do. Just like I thought that was funny. But what I come to realize, um, that it was that religious God that, well, the lie that I was against. And that's what I think that religion keeps people in that lie. It's like the greatest con job in history to me. But I will say I've come to realize, that like all these objects that I can see in front of me, all these man-made objects, right? Were all created from our mind. And I am a firm believer in patterns of nature. And so therefore, nature, all objects of nature had to have come from a mind as well. Like just as we are nature, we are creation. Our creation came from some thought, all is mind. So that's what I think about when it comes to religion. You got anything, Jerry?
Yeah, so what is the exact topic or question that we're discussing today?
Well, like you could just tell us your experience with religion. That would be cool, man, because your perspective on it is a good start. Right now, we're just kind of defining the word and talking about our experience with religion,
Yeah, so I pretty much didn't know what religion was until I saw Mark Pass's work. When he broke down the word, I was like, man, I've never seen this before. Like someone actually defining the word. Like that is what I was like. I wanted to know what the facts were. Like when I was a kid, I was raised Catholic. I asked the priest, hey, I asked him a question, and his answer was, you just have to believe, like, you just have to have faith. I thought that would, like, it didn't satisfy my question, but I kind of just nodded my head and agreed. And I did deviate from the path. My mother, she's like hardcore, she's a hardcore Catholic. So my whole family is. So I'm surrounded by pictures of Mary, and I was in the Navy, and I decided to join a Christian uh, Bible study group. And there it was all, they were Christian, so they said, look, being Catholic is wrong. This is the way. You can only pray to Jesus and God. So I ended up saying I thought they were right. So, but I didn't live up to those standards, and I ended up like praying to God, and I said, God, please, can you please show up to me? And he never did. So I kind of threw a temper tantrum, and but then I wanted to like connect with God again. So I only knew people who were either like Catholic or Christian or Muslim, like nothing about natural law. So I ended up, not being atheist. But then I came across Mark Passio, and then he broke down the word religion, and that I was immediately hooked, because that made so much sense to me, how all these religions, like one of them has to be the right one. But my opinion is no. I mean, how do we know that one is the right one? Like, you have to ask questions, you have to do like research, like who wrote these words? Like, could it have been edited? Like, follow it to the origins. No, I don't think anybody like near me asks these questions. They just nod their head and agree and just have faith. I think that we should be questioning, like, hey, could could the people who raised me Catholic, could they be wrong? I'll pass it to you, Chris.
I think what you're talking about is doubt, and I was telling Rick about a little memory I was having of, I grew up in church. My dad was a preacher for a large part of my childhood. He led Sunday school class. We went to church every Sunday. I was very religious about being religious. And we took it really seriously. But luckily, my dad was also one who taught me to question things. But I remember being one particular church study group or a Sunday group. We used to even go to study groups outside of church during the week sometimes. And I remember this conversation where we were talking about doubt. And we were basically asking the question, is it wrong to doubt? You know, you're supposed to have faith. And Christian, you're very much encouraged from the very beginning, just have faith. You have to have a strong faith, you know. Your faith is your firm foundation, right? Everything's based on your faith. And then so we were talking about this problem of doubt. You know, does God doubt? You know, why do we have doubt? You know, and I think that question never goes away. If we were created and there's a creator, why would that creator give us this doubt? You know, and why does that doubt keep coming? Why do we keep having these questions? You know, like I've loved being around little children because they never stop asking questions. They go, why? 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 And you give the answer, why? Why is that? You know, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, when people start getting older and they stop doing that, that's when they start to calcify and get brittle, and they're able to get their brain to the point where they can't really look at all the options anymore and keep asking those questions. And I think there's something very inherent and real in being alive in this universe that forces you to ask questions, because there's mysteries. We're in a world of mysteries, and you stand on top of a mountaintop and you look out and it's like, wow, you know, being on top of a mountain or looking at some of the amazing things in nature. There's no words. We try to come up with words. In fact, all of our words that we come up with, whether it's poetry or music, are inspired by nature because it's so amazing. And even though it's a normal thing that we've been born in our whole life, it still continues to amaze us and inspire us. There's something else going on here in this reality, and it's not just materialism. There's deeper realms, and so people find all these ways to relate to that reality, and they create all these different stories. And that's basically what I've come across is, I use the term storytelling, is that we have to be cautious about storytelling, because storytelling is good. It serves a purpose. It helps us, you know, relate to someone else what we're trying to describe. A story can embellish a concept. It can, you know, I can share an idea to another person with a metaphor or a story. And that's what's wonderful about, for instance, the Bible or stories people tell in religions, is they can share these wonderful concepts or ideas that we can kind of like wrap our brain around, right? Talk about to bind. You wrap your brain around something because it has certain attraction, right? But what's crazy is that all through history, people have been murdering each other and killing each other by the hundreds of thousands. And you think, how do rulers do that? How do people, you're a king, you want to get all the men in your kingdom, right, to go attack these people in another country so you can get all their resources. How are you going to convince them to do it, right? Well, all the rulers in history have come up with the best possible ways they can and tried them out. And that's what we've seen, is lots of destruction, because people get really good at convincing other people to do stuff that they otherwise wouldn't do, you know? And what does it take to get someone to risk their life? You know, you have to tell them a pretty fantastic story to convince somebody to risk their life or risk the life of their family or leave their family to go possibly die. Why are you going to do that? You know, unless someone tells you a really good story. And usually the stories go something like this. You know, when you die, really bad stuff's going to happen. You know, there's going to be hell, you know, you're going to have hell to pay. So you better do what's right. And I know what's right because God told me. Okay. And that's one of the ways the story goes, you know. Here's another way the story goes. Oh, there's a bunch of bad, evil people. They're going to come kill us. So we got to go kill them first, you know. But that's not quite as inspiring as God told me that we're the heavenly inspired ones that he chose, and we're supposed to go kill them because God said it's okay. You know, like if you had that information, if you knew God told you it was cool, you could just go kill people and take their stuff, then why not, right? If that's the way the story goes. So like whenever we allow ourselves to believe stories, we have to like consider all through history this has been done over and over in every possible way, in every way it can be done.
Yeah.
So how many stories have been told, how many stories have been written down, and how many of those stories have been used to convince people to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do? So you know, just a real simplistic view of history and religion and rulers, and why it's a dangerous thing to believe anybody's story without being able to actually verify it. I'll pass it back to Brandon.
Yeah, I'm over here licking my lips because we got to elevate this conversation because a lot of people don't understand, because you're talking about how not asking questions, and um there is another group that doesn't want you asking questions, and hell is cults. And you're talking about how storytelling and pretty much myth. Well, every religion came from the ancient cults, and I've talked about how cult, how ideology, and cult, how indoctrination, and these religions use this, these same cult like techniques. How they'll isolate you from loved ones, they'll isolate you from friends. For with a Bible study, or hey, come down to the church. Hell, just come to talk. So pretty much they get you in their environment, and then they'll have the herd conformity. They all regurgitate the same things. Oh, just read the Bible. Oh, you just gotta have faith. Oh, just believe in Jesus Christ. And then they'll have repeat, have repeat all these slogans, have repeat these mantras, have repeat how the programming. How you gotta repeatedly keep reading the Bible, and they'll use tactics of fear and trauma. Hey, if you don't believe hard enough, if you don't, how go to this, how this building, then you may go to hell. How you'll burn hell in hell. So these are techniques to get you to be obedient. How to get you to fall hell in line. And what I mean by how the ancient cults of the world is the astro-theological cults. Because if you look at majority of these sun saviors, or these solar saviors, or in these hero myths, then a lot of them were based on hell the sun. And I have a few of them right here. And a lot of these were father sky gods, sun gods, or like the head god or the savior god. You had Enki or Ea of the Sumerian culture. You had Marduk. You had Baal. You had Brahman of the Vedic culture. You had Jupiter. Which was Zeus. Before that, you had Uranus. Then you had Tian in certain traditions. Then you had Anu, was what the sky god in Samaria. You had Horus, who was the sun god in Egypt. You had Odin, you had Osiris, you had Zeus Pater, where we get the word Peter from. Then you had Sol Invictus of the Roman dynasty. Then you had Helios, which was another sun savior, of the Greek / Roman dynasty. You had Elagabus, which was a sun title that was given to the rulers of Rome. And of course, you had Mithra of the Persian, dynasty, who was the Christ before Jesus Christ, which people don't, know about. He was the sun savior. Then you had Jupiter or Jupiter Sabazios. If people are familiar with Jesus, doing this, hand gesture, that's actually a Roman, older symbol that was represented by Sabazios. Then you had Atum in the Egyptian. He was represented in the sun when it was setting, and then Atum pretty much turned into Khepera, which was in like the earlier dynasties before Horus. Then you had Amun-Ra, which was another sun savior. Then you had Jove, which we all know Jove is talked about in the Bible. You had Dionysus, which he was in one of the main cults, of the ancient world. And then you have Isus in the Gaelic traditions. Then you had Tian, or Tian, he was in the I want to say the Etruscan tradition. And then you had Adonai. We all know about Jehovah. We all know about El. We all know about Allah. We all know about Apollo. You had Saturnus, Kronos, Tammuz, and my favorite, Lu, of the Gaelic traditions. So all of these were considered to be sun saviors. These were supposed to be the ones that was going to, help save humanity. when in actuality, when you have to rewind it back to the way the ancient man, lived, it was all about planting crops. It was all about, understanding that natural cycle of the sun, the rising and setting of the sun, because in the daytime it was equated with life. Springtime was life, and in darkness, how nighttime, or in the season of death, how winter, it was equated with death. Because if you didn't have your crops, if you didn't have all of your goods, if you didn't have all of the things that you needed, how when it came time to how to hunker down, when it got cold, then a lot of people, didn't make it. So these stories were used as a representation of nature. And the sun was always considered to be the savior for mankind, because at nighttime, all of these animals, would come out. Hell, for they didn't have technology, how back then. And we hear all these stories of, so and so, how was a shepherd, how so and so would watch the sheep. Well, that was always in esoteric forms a representation of the ones who would stay out at night and they would watch the stars. See, people equate, how watching the herd and watching the sheep to actually real sheep. No, it was the ones who stayed out late at night and watched the stars, because the stars were used as a means of time and as a means of navigation. So those that were initiated into the mystery schools, it was symbolic in language. So if you was watching the stars and how you was watching this, then you understood that, hey, once this certain time frame or once this constellation started to show itself, then hey, maybe you had a certain amount of time frame left to start planting your seeds, to start planting your crops, or to start gathering, your crops. So all of this was very important to ancient man. So they would create stories, create myths to try to get people to understand this and to try to pass this knowledge on to further generations. But sadly, how once, how once it got tampered with, how with the priest class, these stories got manipulated, and it went from myths into, like forms of sorcery, to where they took these aspects of the SUN and they created the SON. And a lot of people really need to understand the kind of esoteric connections with her religion and the whole ancient cults, because you had the stellar, you had the lunar, you had the Saturnian, and you had the solar. Those were the four major ones. And then you had the three lesser cults, which was the Dionysian cult, you had the Venus cults, and of course we can't forget you had the cult of the volcano, because Yahweh was originally a volcano cult, because ancient man considered that when the volcanoes were erupting, that magnificent force, that release of energy, ancient man thought that it was God telling them, like, hey, you had done something wrong. And we've all seen those older movies of how they would, make sacrifices to the volcano gods. Well, yeah, because freaking ancient man was very superstitious. Pass on to Derek.
Ooh la la. I'm so honored. Thank you, Brandon. And yeah, thank you so much for breaking that down so beautifully and deeply. And yeah. Geez. Astrotheology. Yeah, man. So yeah, Chris, just to back it up, Chris, man, I just wanted to say real quick of just, yeah, like it is really interesting. And you look at all these, like I mentioned before, all these edifices. And yes, I mean, I glazed on a lot of this stuff. I still have respect for, whoever. I had good relations with, folks in France of any religion, any walk of life, if they do me good, it's all reciprocity or whatever. You know what I mean? But I don't, I mean, I haven't learned about this before, really living in Europe, but there were people who spent their entire life, devoted their whole entire life towards like building this, monument even, or a church that they would never see the light of day of completion upon. You know what I mean? And just that power of, belief and just, like, hey man, you building this church, you're going straight to heaven, man. Like, just keep at it, man. Like it's like free slave labor type of stuff. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure they, indentured servants, you get a little whatever. But yeah, it's just that's really interesting to consider all that. And Yeah, and there are so many different names to name so many different gods, and how many people are really at odds with, which one's the best, or all this stuff. And this has been playing out for how many thousands of years? Like, really? Like, I'm trying to wedge all these divides, and just, what are people doing with their entire lives actually with all that? Like, what is there to gain with these arguments? And like, yeah, and Jim, you brought up a great point, and this needs to be, emphasized again, of just like the generational trauma from how many generations back of, yeah, all this fear-based, trauma-based mind control of all these things going on within any kind of religious sect, or all this stuff. And yeah, there was ritualistic abuse and all these other things, and yeah, Brandon, you mentioned people getting sacrificed. That was someone's mother, daughter, sister, brother, lover, father, mother, you know what I mean? So like, people died because of what? you know and I thought Jesus pulled the switch out on people trying to, practice these organized bullshit dogmatic religions, as well as the financial, district. That's, just another mind control manipulation. And yes, the false dogmatic belief system of authority, which is government and all this stuff. You got the V and the B with the Latin, as Brandon was talking about before, and he mentioned in his presentation, which I didn't mention before. The title of it is "Why Natural Law is Not a Religion." And to add on to that title, which is brilliant, like, natural law is that one ultimate unifying, like the law of one type of thing that, we can all find that common ground towards. And if anyone in any religion could kind of just like glean off of like what their religion hints towards, and kind of siphon off all the other minutia that's not really serving them or their communities all that well, that'd be great. You know what I mean? So yeah, not to go on that. So yeah, on to the next. Thank you. And yeah,
I think
thanks, Chris,
it's
for having
good
us
to
on, brother man.
yeah. Thanks, Derek, for sharing that. And it got me thinking that, one good thing we were kind of defining what the word means. Religion can mean to bind. It can mean to bind in connection. It can mean to begin again. It can mean to start over, basically. So I've kind of seen this. One way I like to look at that is a lot of words have two connotations, a negative and a positive. And the positive way to look about religion is from something I'm working on personally, which is what I call self-discipline. And I see that as my inner religion. And I think each person needs to work on their inner religion. So how do you bind yourself? What do you bind yourself to? What things do you not do? Is usually more what our personal inner religion is about, is making decisions what we don't do, you know? And so I think that it's pretty important to recognize that having an inner religion is a good thing. But I think we're all in agreement here on this other term that we see tossed around in the world, having an external religion, in terms of like what I was saying, rulers telling other people, here's what God is, and here's how you should relate to God. Or somebody giving you some type of manual or paperwork or book telling you what your relationship with your divine connection should be and how it should work. That seems to infringe upon our personal choice of how we want to relate to our creator, right? So based on that idea, I'll hand it off to Rick. What comes to mind, Rick?
I agree, Chris. Because when I think of religion, I think that it's supposed to bring people together. That's what I was taught, that it brought people together. And what do you see around the world is that religion is doing anything but that. Organized religion, it's not, from what I see, bringing people together. If anything, it's making a divide even greater. And I totally agree that, because just let me explain. I remember when I went, like I was saying earlier, I went to Catholic school, and then when I got out of Catholic school, I definitely strayed away from religion totally. I just was not happy with it. And then I remember when I first got sick with what I have, I remember that was probably one of the lowest points in my life, like that I can remember. I was pretty much about as depressed as you can get. And I remember for some reason wanting to go to a church. And I remember asking my mom, you have to bring me to a church. And kept saying that. And so finally I get a ride to the church and I go in and the lady's at the front desk and she's like, there's nobody here, like except me, but you're welcome to go in and, pray, do whatever you want. And so I went in and I just remember kind of falling into the pew and I was at such a low point thinking about all the stuff that I read, that I learned, and just really questioning things. And for some reason, something kept going into my head that the answers are in me. It's hard to say that. I'm just thinking that that's what I kept saying to myself, that the answers I'm seeking are in me. They're not in a book. They're not in somebody telling me on a standing up on a podium telling me. I had to go in really deep inside myself. And I remember that's what I drew from that experience. I remember leaving there in a totally different, starting on a different outcome. And it wasn't overnight. I didn't leave there and all of a sudden I kind of even strayed away after that point. But I still remember that lingering, the answers are inside of me. And I've always remembered that point because I kind of, I kind of look at the nature as my church, like the outside is my church and inside of me is my church. And that's kind of what I think you guys were kind of touching on. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but I'm hoping that makes sense. But I just remember that was such a strong moment in my life, is that I remember you have to go inward is where these answers are. And I think a lot of people look outside for answers. They're always looking at a figure. They're looking at a book, whatever it is, and never really turning in. And that was such a powerful moment for me. And I still reading stuff in the Bible, I still can learn from that. I'm not saying that I don't look at stuff like that and not learn. I definitely do, but it just gives me a different look. If you guys kind of know what I'm explaining. So sorry, I didn't mean to ramble.
No, you're good.
No, that was great, Rick. Awesome. How about you, Jim?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing that you bring that up, Rick, because I had a very similar experience where I was down. It was the first few weeks when I was trying to stop drinking, and I was on my first farm and struggling to make this new business, work out. And my wife was leaving me and all this stuff, and the farm was on the grounds of another church property. And I was I am a meditator. And back then I decided I was really just fucked up and down. I decided I'm going to go in the church in the daytime. And I was the only one in there. And I had that. I mean, I can't explain that. Why is that it happened inside that religious building? But I felt God for like the first time in a long time, like since I was a kid, I guess. But I really experienced that in that external facade, but also realizing what you're saying, like, it's within. So that's cool. I had that similar experience.
Right on.
When it comes to other aspects of religion, maybe I'll just bring this up, like how I just see it as a business. Christianity is like $1 trillion industry. And there's that whole Born Again, Joel Osteen, and all these guys on TV. And it's like, it's sickening, and that's
Tax-free.
more, right? It's more like anti-Christ stuff, but it's just more money. And so there's that. And my favorite question, which I brought up earlier, would Jesus Christ vote? Would Jesus Christ vote if he was here today? Would he vote for the president of the United States? What do you think, Jerry?
Hell nah. He would be, man, if he was here today, that would be something. Like, he would be a celebrity. So, but just on the topic of religion, I would like to mention that, I have this book, Tragedy and Hope 101, in my mind because I think it's in chapter 1 where the author, Joseph Plummer, is giving a summary of Carol Quigley's Tragedy and Hope book. He's giving a summary of that book. And in chapter 1, he's talking about the elite and secret societies that got together and basically wanted to rule the world, and they wanted to take over the world, and basically they're from Britain, so they want Britain to take over the world secretly. So I remember reading, and they were saying that they were going to make businesses, or if they could get away with it by saying, look, we're doing this in the name of God, then they would do it. So what I'm trying to say is people might have bought into that just if their mission was because of God. So I thought that was huge. Like, man, like how much power that has. Like, I don't know. I saw this recent show, and it was a Netflix show with my dad. It's the Ozark. It's called Ozark, and this guy walked into this store, and he's crazy though because there was a shooter in the store, so he was robbing the cashier, and the guy before he walked in, he knew there was a shooting going on, but he walked in anyways, and then he got shot, and then he said, "Oh, because of God," and he became a hardcore Christian. But the whole point of this is that, like, I don't think it was Jesus that saved him. I think it was like luck. But yeah, it's a lot going on in my mind right now. But I just wanted to get those thoughts out. So pass it to you, Chris.
Right on. Yeah. Thanks, Jerry. Yeah. And you know what's complicated too for the modern person looking at this word religion or the idea is that it's so convoluted. There's so many different. I mean, if you think about it, we're at the point in history when everything has happened leading up to now. So that's a lot of cumulative storytelling that's going on, a lot of cumulative dynasties and generational power situations, you know. And so we have a lot to look back at and compare with, right? And like what I was pointing out in so many of these situations, we see people in positions of power always abuse that power. And there's indoctrination going on where from being children, we're trained to believe in this idea of authority. And that's something that we believe in like a religion. And we don't even realize that that's a religion, but we hold ourselves to following rules that we don't even need to follow. For instance, most laws, there's no one around there every time you come to a stop sign to make sure that you actually stop before you keep going again. Most of the rules we follow in life are things that we do to ourselves, self-governance, right? And we're so used to having someone to look up to and someone to ask for what's right. Is it okay if I do this? Mother, may I, right? Remember that game? We used to play this game when I was a kid called Mother, May I, right? Where you would have to ask permission to take a step forward. We're so used to this, and it's so built into our thinking patterns and the paradigms and structures of our institutions of our world that we're very mind controlled. And we don't realize that, you know, when we're talking about religion here, we're really not just talking about Catholicism or Hinduism. We're actually talking about things like government and the very idea of authority, which in itself is a religion. Money is a religion in the modern way money's used, because we're believing in something that doesn't even really exist, and we're bound to it. It owns us. It owns our decisions, right? So there's a lot of types of religion, and then the newest religion of the new world occultists, the new world order occultists, the dark sorcerers of the world, is the religion of of health, right? Now they own your health, right? This religion of sickness and disease, of science. Science has become the new religion, I guess you could say. And so I thought I'd just kind of change up the conversation with that a little bit. Let's look at the different types of religion and how we use that word. Yeah.
You brought up some good points because, Rick talked about how, he was asking questions and, he started to help go within himself. Her religious thought, all forms of her religious thought are based on external authority, and religious thought is what has given us the religion of statism, because as Chris pointed out, you got people who are going out and voting. They are giving up their power to representatives, to represent them in the now. So I'm about to do my best, Leslie Powers, and we have to learn to find our locus of control, because most people who are in religion, they find their locus of control externally, and they'll say, hey, I can't create any change. I'm powerless. I'm a bad person. What can I do? But in actuality, if you started to go within yourself, then you can start to see like, hey, you have all the power. It's just you believe, how that is external towards you, when in reality, it's you are the power. So people have to change their mindsets, because as long as we continue to think that there is just external power, and I'm not saying, don't think that there are higher states of consciousness or God. What I'm saying is, once you start to give your willpower, your energy, your free will, your ability to think, to discern, your creativity over to another person, and even over to a savior figure, a deity, then you kind of will shirk personal responsibility. You will shirk personal accountability. And that's what we see in a lot of religious thought, is they think that they are not responsible because, so-and-so came here to die for their sins, or because they read the Bible and, they read it more than you, then they're going to go to some, utopia, afterlife. And they are ignoring the present day now. And they are also separating the physical from the spiritual, and not understanding that they are both one and the same. So they're putting more emphasis on the spiritual and forgetting the physical, the present day now, the present. So then therefore, when it comes to taking personal responsibility for the actions, how they just say, what's the point? How that's why we have Jesus, how that's why we have Horus, that's why we have Yahweh, to be held responsible for me, because I don't want to think for myself, when the whole point of all of these allegoric teachers was to get you to think for yourself, because I've heard people say, oh, why are you rebelling? Christ wasn't rebelling. And I'm like, what story did you read? Like he was rebelling, like freaking over the whole point. He wasn't going along with the Roman authorities, so if you are, calling yourself this label, then you should be standing out and using your voice and walking alongside of Christ, and not just, throwing up these idols. Because if you look at what the etymology of the word of idol, it is a graven image or a symbol or an image of anything that is considered to be spiritual. So you have all of these people who are walking around with crosses, all of these pictures of Christ or God or whatever religion, and in actuality, according to their own scriptures, that is idol worship, because you're putting more emphasis on the symbol, and you're putting more emphasis on the image, and you're not putting more emphasis on what was said and the message and the teachings. So the true message and the teachings get lost over time, and then you start bowing down to this cross or to this depiction or to this graven image. Then therefore you kind of lose sight of the true purpose and the true meaning, and you get lost astray. Then therefore, you give your power over, or you externalize your power rather than internalize it, then following the true teaching, so you can pattern your life as this individual, or as the golden rule, because the golden rule was one thing that was talked about in all of their religions. And that's what a lot of people forget, and then they start focusing on the differences than rather what the similarities are. And the biggest similarity of all of these religious teachings. And of course, it should be how natural law and the golden rule. So
Have anyone ever felt double crossed by their own religion? Because there's a lot of symbolism behind that. Double cross, like, yeah, a line with two sticks in the middle. It's like really so basic sometimes. And like, yeah, Jordan Maxwell comes to mind, rest in peace. Oh, yeah, Brandon, by the way. I saw your t shirt. Yeah, buddy. Resting firm between the pillars of enlightenment. Yes. And invite him in through the gates of knowledge for sure. So yeah, are those? What is the cross? Is it not those four quadrants of the seasons, as you mentioned kind of before? Who is it? Mark, John, Luke, and Jacob, or whoever it was. I mean, there's a lot of things to these allegories and this and that, and yeah, a lot of you guys like talked about a lot of stuff that, I mean, one of the biggest projects I dropped in 2022 was something like of a decade in the making. Just here and there, I had all these songs growing up, mixing conscious hip hop and all that stuff is what I do on the side of a lot of other stuff. But yeah, it's a 2.5 hour long, one of the longest hip hop mixes. It's all songs and like little snippets of. I even mixed in like George Carlin, and he talks about and makes jokes about the whole money scheme of all that stuff, and just the whole hypocrisy of people worshiping something invisible that they never really seen in life. They might have felt it in this Holy Spirit feeling they're in the church and this and that. And people really have to bear in mind of the power of the mind and all these placebo effects. And when there's a group of people, that collective consciousness, it creates these egregores and pendulums and things of that nature. It can have a powerful effect. And like if people are really like just so ensconced in this belief of these things, right, then yeah, they'll be enchanted and hypnotized. And there are dark ritual magic things going on in there, and people have to understand that pretty much the majority of religions are based and founded off of dark occultists. It's just what it is since antiquity, since the fall of Atlantis, not tist, but yeah, all these isms and schisms and things that were born from the betrayal of Thoth and the fallen Anu. And you mentioned Anu is this a word for God. Well, no, that's the false light type of God, as in with Yahweh and Jehovah, all these things. And Jehovah, like Jay-Z and all these people trying to like walk in the image of these false light gods. And yes, there's like savior program after savior program after how many religions. Pick throw a rock and you'll hit something with a false light name attached to it. And that goes for archangels as well. Archangel Michael, Archangel Metatron. What do you think the Metatronic reversals are? What do you think the crucifixion implants are in your own DNA? If you haven't pulled out fire letter codex and took a gander at your own scripture within your own blood codex, that kind of stuff, yeah, you really got to get initiated into things that are beyond any scope of any religion is going to fucking tell you. And this goes back to like even before Gnosticism and things of that nature. But yes, they do hinge on these things as far as what the Kabbalion teaches, and written by 3 initiates. Well, Chris, yeah, let's ask some more questions. Who are these initiates? Where did they get that information from? Who were their teachers, and when were they initiated? And like how many eons ago, and all this stuff. So it's so interesting to just peel back as many onions as you can, get to the center core of everything, including the most important thing within your chest, which is what a lot of religions, as Brandon mentioned in his last presentation, it's all about this external type of stuff that people have focused on, not trying to be the true Christ consciousness that is supposed to be the returning Christ. Like stop waiting another 2,000 fucking years for that shit to happen, because it ain't gonna fucking happen. You are the one that's supposed to come in this reality field and be that shining light of Christ consciousness emanating from your crown chakra and beyond that, because this is not just the seven, chakra thing that we have. It's, like a multidimensional thing that people need to just unlock within themselves. And religion has been designed to hold us back from that since beyond antiquity. That's, yeah, that's deep, but yeah.
It's
kinda
deep,
like
and
that.
it really points to what was kind of on the tip of my tongue, is that religion is the problem. What we're discussing about religion is this way of thinking. There's a problem in this way of thinking because there's a certain way of thinking that allows, like I said, storytelling to rule over reality, where we can, where we might, like, for instance, go to war and lose our life over some whim of some ruler who just wants something that belongs to someone else. That's very possible, and very possible they can convince you with a good story, like I said before. And when we allow ourselves to be in that state of being where we're willing to just believe something that someone has told us or that's written somewhere because it's old, or because a lot of people think that, or a lot of people believe that, then we put ourselves in a very precarious place, especially as a group, and so that's why we need our own inner guide, our own inner guidance. And I've often pointed out to close friends I've had that are really stuck on, all, like what Rick was saying with his conversation with his friend, where all truth comes from the Bible. They're completely stuck on this sometimes. And I understand why, because it's generational. Your parents thought that way. And there's so much when you're part of religion. And I'm like, I grew up in religion. There's the holidays. There's so much feeling and so much tradition and repetition. One of the hallmarks of mind control is repetition, and tradition, repetition, and respect. These all get tied together, right, with our emotions and our feelings, and we come really stuck on things are the way they've been, the way my dad did it, the way his grandparents did it, and it sort of puts us in this position of getting really defensive when someone attacks your heritage. It's more than just your religion, it's who you are, it's your family, right? Like, I get that, and no one's just going to lose their religion overnight. But there are some things we can come to realize, like I pointed out, that it's dangerous to believe stories, right? And so, you have to kind of admit at a certain point, if you're basing your whole thought process on a thing, or your whole vision of reality on something that's written down on some papers, it doesn't matter. Do you really know exactly who wrote it? And even if you did, would you want to base your life or your family's life or other people's life on some words on paper, when we have our own ability to discern? And what I was going to say is, the conversation I've had with so many other people that are stuck on this idea that the Bible, for instance, is divinely inspired. I'm like, well, what about somebody who's born somewhere where they were never exposed to that and no Bible existed? Or how about a period of time before a Bible was written? So people didn't have God back then. Did God grow out of the Bible? Obviously that just doesn't make sense, that all wisdom is contained in a book, because there was wisdom long before any book was written or any technology was created. So let's just start there. Let's start simple, right? What is, right? We don't need a tablature, a way to write things down in order to have truth. We don't need a pen or a typewriter or a printing press in order to access what was given to us from the creation, from the divine. And so I'll pass it to Jim.
Yeah, I mean, I just keep going back to what you guys are saying about just thinking, how the whole religion is like a psyop. Like people believing that Jesus died for you, or he's coming to save us. That's to get people to stand down, right? To not take action. I feel like that was a big part of. I know. I guess I'm just repeating a lot of what we've said earlier, but that's what I get mostly from religion. It's meant to keep people from, well, to bind them, right? Or that's what we're saying, to keep people from taking action. At least that's what I get. I mean, and you talk about the cults. Earlier this summer, there was this woman came up to me in the parking lot with this newspaper, some international religion, and they're like hardcore believe in the second coming of Christ, you know. And I started asking her my questions, like, would Jesus Christ vote, and I scared the shit out of her. Like, she went into that flight or fright, and like she passed me on to like this other woman in the parking lot. But like, Pete, there's really, there's a lot of that, where people just believe that it's the I've heard it called the psyop, and you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
A
That's-
psychological operation,
yeah.
if you
Yeah.
might say. Yeah. Just to clarify for anyone who doesn't know, but yeah. So
I think thank you for that. I think the most important thing is to think, and they don't want us to think.
Yep.
And think clearly and intelligently. Use your coherence, like John Trudell. I love that man. Rest in peace as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just and the biggest part I get, whether or not you believe Jesus was real, or the actual philosophy and the morality and the story and the golden rule, the message to be like Christ.
Yeah.
The Christ consciousness
Yeah.
is the second coming. I'm down with that. I'm not down with he's coming to save us, which is the religious message.
Can I add on something, Jim, to what you were saying about thinking?
Sure.
It just came to me. Thinking, using our brain to think and using our mind to critical think, I think is such a gift that so many people waste and squander, because what do? They they look to an external source to do their thinking for them. They look, whether it be a religious figure, it could be this false belief in the authority of government. But my point is, even if they're looking at a celebrity or something like that, they give up this gift to put this belief in this false authority. And I just think it's such a waste. I just really hope that people start using this gift of, just using your mind and critical thinking, and kind of don't get stuck in this box of one thing, whether it be a religion or it be this belief and this false belief in government or authority. Kind of look all over and explore a lot of different things, and then bring it internal and start kind of working through it. And I think that'll be a lot better than just kind of blindly following somebody. Thinking, I think, is so important. So I'm glad you brought that up, Jim.
Thanks. And that's your show, right? I've been thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man.
Great show.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to do with fear, right? That's what keeps people from doing thinking, because thinking is scary.
Yep.
If you think and ask too many questions, that might topple some of your beliefs. That might make you reframe the walls of your paradigm, and that can be pretty scary. It's like an earthquake, right? The ground's shifting underneath you. And I think people use religion as a way to prop themselves up for things that they feel nervous or scared about. If there's some external authority that can tell them the answers and that can guide them safely, well, if you do this, everything will be okay. And if you believe that there's this God that's watching you at every moment and always there to protect you, well, that makes life a lot easier. You can just you can go along. You don't have to worry quite so much.
Mhm.
And so I guess the other side of that is the more puritanic style of religions, where you think everything you're doing is wrong and you're constantly hating on yourself and guilting yourself, and you can barely do anything. But that has its dangers as well. Whereas if, like what you guys are talking about, is we go inside and we ask ourselves, well, what feels right inside? What can I combine my intelligence and my logic and find some kind of happy medium, and talk to other people and see what actually makes sense in the actual scenario, rather than having some external rule to guide me in the right direction at all times, or have some book I have to go look at and thumb through a bunch of pages to find the exact right, thing. Where, I'm not saying books, verses, these are all great things to find inspiration and to find, I love the parables of Jesus. In fact, I'm going through them as we're talking, trying to find an appropriate parable, because in fact, the parables of Jesus in the Bible have so much depth of, you can apply them to so many things. Allegoric, like an allegory or in metaphor, you can apply them to many situations in life, and you can learn so much from them. And you can look at these different religions and learn from so much from them.
Mhm.
The ones I'm most concerned with, honestly, now that we're talking about it, are the religion of government, the religion of authority, and the religion of money. Like, even people that call themselves religious people, I know they're not really pure, because they're all making what I call money-based decisions. Every church I've ever been in, and I've been in a lot of churches, that they're all making money-based decisions, not principle-based decisions. It's money over principles,
Right.
because they're
Yeah.
willing to make a lot of sacrifices to live in this world we live in, and just sort of say, well, things are what they are. We can't change certain things. But if you truly believed in the principles of what you believed in, you wouldn't put up with certain things, and you would know one thing's bigger than the other. And that, if you're making a decision from the point of view of what works out the best financially for us as a church, and to keep this building here, and to keep this structure going and the power on, well, we're gonna have to pay our taxes. Well, you're not really being true to the word, even what's in your Bible or your scripture, and nobody is. Nobody who claims to be religious is. And that's just something I've been able to observe and think about. And I haven't had a good argument to go the other way. And same with the other argument I said about someone who's born somewhere where there never were any books. They're not supposed to have a opportunity to connect with their God, or the divine connection. It's impossible. That doesn't make sense. I'll pass it last. Jerry, you got any thoughts you want to? I think we'll kind of go one last time around here and finish up this conversation. Anything pop up for you, Jerry?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you guys are great people to talk to. So, yeah, want to give a shout out to Crypt Rick for just bringing this topic to us. And yeah, you really gave some great answers there on the thinking, because I was thinking that, like, people don't think. Like, I used to be one of the people who just did what I was told. So I just know there's people out there like that. But then I'm thinking, so I know there's people can change. So I want to talk about solutions. So think for yourself. Like, Richard Grove has this great quote. It's like, in the space between thinking and reacting, or before you react, you have a space to think, and that's freedom. So I feel like people reacting or having bad thoughts, and then they're having like emotions erupt, like that can lead to slavery. So if you have to pretty much get a hold of yourself, control yourself, think, like meditate on this stuff. Is there anything that we said that resonates with you? Look into this stuff. I think the solution is to talk about this stuff, bring up topics that not many people are talking about. So yeah, I am grateful to be here. Pass it to you, Chris.
Wise words, Jerry. Thank you. Much appreciated. I'm going to go right over to Brandon, and then I'll let you pass it on from there.
Yeah, people have to be willing to explore their creativity, explore their imagination, and they have to learn about themselves. They have to learn about how how the mind works. How study the internal processes that are within the body. You have to understand how the brain functions. So you really have to start to educate how yourself from the internal basics. Because if we are talking about thinking, a lot of people's negative thinking is equating health negative behavior, but what's programming that negative, health thinking? It's usually your environment, how where you grew up in, and how your culture. So we really have to change that, because a lot of this how religious thought, how outside of government, how just mainly with the cultural, how religions is based upon how where you was raised, or where you was born, how in life. And when you look at the word culture, how it pretty much just means the same as cult, because it means to cultivate, planting seeds. So these negative seeds have been planting, and they are reaping, or springing how negative fruit. So the more and more you start to take in good information, you start to learn how about yourself, you start to explore your own creativity, you can start to chip away hell at those negative fruits, and then those negative seeds, and then replant those positive seeds that will hell in turn produce, how ripe fruit, how good moral health behavior. So we really have to be willing to step into that form of transformation. But in order for that to happen, religious thought has to be chipped away. It has to be, because you're not going to take good thinking, good information, and put it over top of religious thought. It's not going to happen. People have to be willing to jump into the unknown and lose the fear in order to start to go through these processes to take in good thought. And I'll pass it on to Derek.
Hey Rick, I've been thinking, man. Did you know that thoth means thought? Also kind of what I mentioned, back in the day. But yeah, Brandon, man, those fruits of the labor that have been cultivated by the cultists, and in the culture of cultivity of all these things. And it's just a shame that certain aspects that like metaphorically speaking, things like religion and all this stuff, they're like the GMOs and the pesticides on the fruits that we're consuming that, and it's just like kind of toxic to us to a degree. They're not gonna fucking kill us instantly. They're not gonna brainwash us in a or whatever, but it's just something to consider. And we're not throwing anyone under the bus or in the shitter in regards to we're not Bible bashing or whatever. It's just like there's so much more beyond that. And like, just in my observations, I've just seen people that are just like seem so like half of the potential of what they could really truly be if they would just let a lot of stuff go. And there's so much like ego attachment to these things, and the dogmatisms and cult like behaviors of these things, and not willing to open up towards being challenged upon what they think they know and their beliefs and blah blah blah. And yeah, we're focusing more on like Christianity and all this stuff, but I mean, like, I've been to Israel. I drove around from Tel Aviv to all the way to like the Dead Sea, and a couple other places with my ex-wife and some other friends and this and that. And like, yeah, like anywhere. And I've been in like Vietnam and Thailand, and it's more Buddhist over there, even though they got like the Muslim influence, and like there's like a clusterfuck of all this stuff going on. And it's not just the religious aspects that are driving people's behaviors in a not the best way. It's also just, it's the unholy trinity, right? What Jesus was against, like people drunk off of Jesus juice that was toxified by the wrong teachings of what he's about and all that stuff, allegorically speaking, whether it's real or whatever. He was against the government, the dogmatic organized religion, and the money systems. And those are the things that people are so attached to, which drives a lot of people's behaviors and motivations and other things like that, as we all kind of discussed from the get-go. Just to like reframe all this stuff, like these are all forms of religion, and we have to just like break away from this a little bit. Unfortunately, we're all subjected to it, and we all got to live underneath all these banksters and wanksters and motherfucking pranksters. By the way, like, yeah, I drove on Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv in Israel, by the way. Does that make any sense? Like, just, hey, whatever. But yeah, hey, Rothschild and Rockefeller, y'all been better in America, and they're everywhere anyways. But no, we're better off rather without them. But yeah, not to ramble on and a lot of stuff. Chris, and everyone. Jim, Jerry, Rick, Brandon, thank you so much for tonight. Happy New Year, by the way, or Happy True Year.
True
Yeah, like we
year.
have to celebrate, like we're getting scratched by Satan's claws, on the 25th, just because of what, just to represent their theological reasons for that, symbology and this and that, when a new year should start more towards springing forward into new life around a certain time where we march into the new year towards April, Aries, that's kind of like the first, you know,
Hey, we
oh yeah,
the way I see, we
aren't you
could
one,
take
Brandon? Yeah.
almost we
Anyways,
could take any opportunity to begin again, right? And
yeah,
that's
That's
what this
sure.
true.
is. This is an
Yep.
opportunity, because
Yep.
we have this tradition and this repetition in our society. I try to take that as a positive thing. This is an opportunity for me, just by tradition, to look at myself and look at how this year's gone. Yeah, I know it's Gregorian year, but whatever, this is the slavery I grew up in. Now that I can see it for what it is, it doesn't bother me, and I'm okay with this cycle, because this is the time of year that a lot of people are doing that. So I do that too. I make some goals. I think about things I can
Yep.
do. And I think really for someone listening, what I want you to take away from this discussion is what I keep hearing each of these wonderful gentlemen saying, is that the power is within you, and that this is your castle. This is your kingdom. Your inner sanctum is your inside of your mind and your guts, your other mind, right? And that's your holy of holies, is the inside of you, and your ability to do what you want is this amazing gift that you've been given by the universe. And your body is like a divine conduit for universal expression of reality, to create things, to make things. Okay. I got a little thing I did take out of the Bible, is about a parable that said, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all your seeds, yet when it grows, it's the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and perch in its branches. So does that mean you should go out and plant a mustard seed? Yeah, hell yeah, go plant a mustard seed. But no, it also means a lot more. It means that each of us is like that tiny mustard seed. Even though we seem small, like one grain of sand on a whole beach, we have the potential and the opportunity to do anything, to bloom into the biggest tree, and to affect people in the most awesome way, and to make the biggest difference in the world, and to enjoy freedom and explore freedom. And you have that freedom. It was given to you by the universe. And all the time in history leading up to this moment never afforded you the opportunity to look at this much information that's out there. It's all out there for you to look at and understand and think about. Why give up so quick and just decide on something that someone else told you? Don't be a fool. Think deeper and take this opportunity. Seize the day. That's where I go with it. Anybody else want to close up?
Say I'm grateful as always. Thank you guys. It's really cool to talk about this stuff, and just leave off with that. Yeah, just think. Maybe I'll leave it with some a question for people to think about. And it could go for all religions, even atheists, to think about it. But coming from Christianity, if you were brought up in a religion and believing in the golden rule, and at the same time you were brought up in the government, and we just say, take America for example, if you were a Christian who grew up in America, which one are you choosing? Think about which one if you're still a practicing Christian or religious person, which one are you truly choosing? And think about it. If that makes any sense.
You can't serve two masters. Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. You can't have both. But everybody wants to think they can, but they're not thinking. Okay.
Justifications.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether it be synagogue, mosque, church, whatever, temple, in between the temple, construct the proper foundation within. Like, it'd be nice to see people praise themselves a little bit more, and that's not like a call to like
Don't worry.
Leave off with that. Yeah, just think. Maybe I'll leave it with some a question for people to think about. And it could go for all religions, even atheists, to think about it. But coming from Christianity, if you were brought up in a religion and believing in the golden rule, and at the same time you were brought up in the government, and we just say take America for example, if you were a Christian who grew up in America, which one are you choosing? Think about which one if you're still a practicing Christian or religious person, which one are you truly choosing? And think about it. If that makes any sense.
You can't serve two masters. Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. You can't have both. But everybody wants to think they can, but they're not thinking. Okay.
Justifications.
Yeah.
yeah, whether it be synagogue, mosque, church, whatever, temple, in between the temple, construct the proper foundation within. Like, it'd be nice to see people praise themselves a little bit more, and that's not like a call to like toxic shadow ego stuff. It's more just tending the fires within,
Right.
and building the proper foundation based on those solid principles, the pillars like Brandon's got going on. Yeah, not to ramble on, but yeah, thank you.
Hey, great talk, guys. I love this conversation. And I'm going to share this coming up on the End Evil podcast, and hopefully you guys share it too, far and wide. I also want to share, Rick and I had a great conversation about religion earlier this week. And
Cool.
Rick, where can we find that? On Freedom Slips or?
Well, we did. I played it at freedomslips.com. So you just go to the archive section, look for Grit Rick's I've Been Thinking, and you can find it there. And I will be posting it on YouTube tomorrow, so you can see the video format of Chris and I's interview tomorrow evening.
Cool. Yeah, and then Brandon just put out a great presentation, which I need to check out. And that's There's No Religion in Natural Law, something like that. Am I saying it right? But One Great Work Network, right?
Yeah,
I'm
it's really
close,
good.
right?
I finished watching it today. Why
Okay,
natural
good
law
on.
is not a religion, because a lot of us talk about natural law and this and that, and like the opposing sides want to be like, well, you're just talking about another religion, like you're in a cult or something like that. And the way that Brandon framed that, just like the title alone is brilliant. But yeah, he's got some really great slides, really informative, and differentiating the two. So yeah,
Looking
give me
forward
the
to
truth.
checking that
Thank you,
one out.
Brandon. Love what
Thanks
you
for
do.
putting that together, Brandon. Yeah, and then
Thank you.
Derek got a lot of good work coming out all the time. Dissolving the Divide, Leslie Powers. Looking forward to keep on watching those series. And
Yeah. Check those videos out. Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon, we got one in, and yeah, I'd love to have all you guys on eventually. We got a lot of divisions going on throughout the population, and yeah, like we're looking to do
religious
this throughout
things,
the
one of them.
whole year, something like that. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to hop on there because like people can talk about the problems, but do they want to know the solutions? So
Yeah, like the ones within themselves, like we're all alluding to with a lot
Yep.
of stuff. But yeah, we're not gonna digress into that towards the end of this segment. But yeah, Chris, thank
We'll
you so
start a
much,
new
man.
topic.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Great chat. We'll come back at it for another difficult and exciting topic coming up soon. Thanks, friends. Have a good night.
Yeah. Happy New Year. True you.
Take care, guys.
Sweet video. Don't worry.
Hello, this is Chris Jansen. Welcome to the End Evil podcast.
It was a crazy year, 2020. I think everybody kind of was losing their mind one way or another. But if you're listening to this, you made it through.
And they're making mistakes, and people are starting to awake.
There is a science of human freedom.
It's also a spiritual journey.
A person under hypnosis will start to see that there's something wrong. Something is wrong.
It's great that you know what you've come to know, but until there's an outlet for that information and you start creating and putting your creations out into the world to teach other people so that they can become as knowledgeable as you.
Life. What is encouraging life is good. That which takes away from life and growth and creativity is not good.